COVID-19 has impacted the working lives of almost everyone in 2020. With total lockdown in late March to the second wave upon us, there have been over 600,000 people who have been made redundant, and the possibility of many more once the furlough scheme ends. The long-term effect of COVID is still unknown. We're having to adapt to the new normal and brace ourselves for another recession, one which could have greater impact than the financial crisis of 2008. But could this be the time where change brings opportunity? Today I'm speaking with Ben Rayner, co-founder of Zengility, a professional services organisation that specialises in work-life transformation and the creation of lifestyle businesses. We discuss how, with a positive attitude and openness to change, COVID-19 could be the catalyst to alter your work-life balance for good. Ben, could you give me a little bit of background as to what Zengility does, and also what made you move from CHS after nearly 18 years?
Yeah, so in a nutshell, Zengility is a professional services company that specialises in creating lifestyle businesses for senior execs. In terms of the second part of your question, is a really interesting question because, you know, like you rightly pointed out, I had been sort of working agency side for nearly 2 decades and decided to make a leap of faith. Now, at the time, I know a lot of people were sort of saying to me, you know, you've got a great opportunity at CHS. You've got a mortgage, you've got 2 young kids. We're on the precipice of Brexit. You know, is this really a good time to do that? But I felt it was. And from my perspective, this sort of came back to an earlier conversation I'd had with my now business partner, Paul Stevenson, in a hotel in 2018, and we sat down and we had a number of conversations, and one of the conversations we had from sort of 2018 onwards was his sharing his vision of the future, a vision that he'd sort of had, you know, nearly a decade ago. And when we were having that discussion about his vision and sort of batting it backwards and forward, I decided it was time, and it was the time for me to sort of take the plunge. And I used all that knowledge of branding and all that knowledge and wisdom that I sort of gathered over those 18 years, and I extracted the essence out of Paul, you know, so that we could express his vision. And that was really the birth of Zengility. The collective insights fused the business together. And we were the perfect blend, and that's why Zengility came about.
Before we move on, I think it's probably worthwhile just trying to understand exactly what Zengility does.
Zengility was originally set up in and around the changing world of work. Paul, as I said earlier, shared a vision with me around the world of work changing. Now, what's been really, really interesting is, of late, the current sort of blessing and curse, we've seen a massive shift in how things have changed. So prior to March, working from home was for the chosen few, and now it's for the masses. And we're now at a tipping point where, because people have been sat at home, they've possibly had a little more chance to reflect about what's important to them. And I think we all need to recognise now that if you've got a burning desire inside you, then you should action that, because otherwise you're going to be a tormented soul. You know, at the end of the day, Zengility was founded to enable people to find their purpose and define it to a commercial reality. So ultimately, we take an individual, Paul works on them on their mindset transformation. We then develop their authentic perception, which is the truth of them expressed, and take them to market through our various launch services that we have.
One of your headlines is working 3 days a week, 10 months of the year.
Yep.
That sounds like nirvana. And is it going to be realistic for many?
Well, I'd ask the question of why does everyone feel that working 5 days a week is a necessity?
Well, I think money must drive a lot of that.
Yeah, well, I just think we've just been conditioned to do it that way. But it goes back to the discussion we had before around choice, you know, and around space. And if you don't have space, then it will become work. And you can go and have a look anywhere. There was an article actually in Forbes magazine recently in and around the Zoom call and how business leaders in certain areas of the world now are now condensing Zoom calls to 15 minutes. Now, I'd suggest that they're condensing Zoom calls to 15 minutes for brevity and for clarity, which makes me think that actually work expands to fill the day. We've all been sat there in meetings thinking, do I actually need to be here? What have I actually contributed? Could this have been done in a faster pace? We all travel to work, or used to all travel to work at the same time. You could see the ripple effect of stress. People trying to drop their kids off first thing in the morning. Everyone's doing the same thing at the same time. When I was speaking to Paul in the early days, I used this analogy of imagine an alien landing in one of the tube stations in London at sort of 7:30, 8 o'clock in the morning, and he sort of sat there going, "Yeah, what's going on? Is there a fire? Where's everyone going? Do we all need to get on the same train together?" They're all sort of crammed into the tube together, and the guy turns to him and says, "What are you talking about?" He's like, "Well, why is everyone rushing? Why is everyone going the same way at the same time in the same place?" He's like, "We're all going to work," and you can see when you look at that, as an outsider looking in, that seems like a crazy thing. Why is everyone trying to get to the same place at the same time? What we're effectively saying is that you, John, me, everybody sort of is working at the same pace at the same time. Well, some people work better in the morning. Some people work better in the evening. So actually there's an argument to say that individuals should be given some form of flexibility to be able to work when not necessarily is appropriate for them, because there needs to be some cohesion. But actually, if you've got to drop your kids off, why force people in for 8:30 in the morning? Why not give them a bit of a buffer? Because actually you would just reduce stress in the workplace. You see people when they're dropping their kids off, if they could push their kids out of a moving car because they're in a rush, they probably would. It's just crazy.
So you say that work expands to fill the day, and that's maybe the case across certain areas. But do you think we're unproductive for a lot of the day?
I think there's enough studies out there and I was one of these people, back in the day. Agency life, overtime is an occupational hazard in agency life, or it certainly was when I was there, and I can't believe it's changed in this short period of time. But when I look back, I would really question how efficient I was, especially after a working week. And I know myself, by the weekend, I was exhausted. I was mentally exhausted. I keep relatively fit as well. So imagine if you weren't fit, how exhausted you would be. So, and there's enough studies out there around efficiency, how long people can actually concentrate for. So I think there is another way, and we all have access to multiple choices, but we all limit ourselves. There are multiple ways of doing this.
I understand the concept of this 3 days a week, 10 months of the year. But for those people who have voluntarily given up their jobs, and all that entails, that's the salary and the fringe benefits, etc., how do they manage to reconcile the differences between the working life they had before and this new working life?
Everyone deals with it differently, is the honest answer. There isn't, certainly from Zengility's point of view, there isn't a cookie cutter approach. If we're to think about retail, for instance, they're in an interesting space, depending on obviously which sector they're working in within that sort of retail space. Grocery is possibly an exception, but you can see even within grocery how things are starting to shape differently now, because over the period where we were all hunkered down in our own homes, a lot of people were forced to transact in a way that maybe they traditionally hadn't had to transact. And there's enough data out there, you can go and rake around for yourself to show that there's actually been growth in the online space, which obviously fits quite neatly into the Webtrends optimized proposition. But we've also seen declines of other sectors. Can't go on holiday when no planes are flying, and Bournemouth.
You're listening to the shortened version of this podcast. To listen to the full version, visit your favourite podcast player and search for Webtrends Optimize or The Big Lift.